The Forgotten Heiress, Part 2.
The days that followed brought unusual excitement to Masaka. Visitors constantly passed through Ssenkungu's compound, some seeking Nambi's hand in marriage, and others simply hoping to see the young woman whose beauty and dignity had become widely known. Despite the attention, Nambi remained unchanged. She still woke before dawn, worked tirelessly, and carried her burdens quietly, knowing that compliments could not make her hardships disappear. Ssenkungu saw only opportunity. He welcomed wealthy visitors, borrowed stools, prepared celebrations, and secretly judged every man by his cattle, wealth, and gifts, rather than his character. Several suitors arrived. The first was the son of a wealthy cattle keeper who proudly spoke of his family's riches and servants, saying that a beautiful wife completed a wealthy man's honor. Nambi quietly noticed that he never cared to know who she truly was. Another suitor, a successful trader, praised her beauty but revealed his belief that wives were possessions meant to obey. Others appeared respectable but carried hidden flaws, anger, drinking problems, or cruel behavior. Each evening, Ssenkungu and Nanziri discussed only which man would bring the greatest reward. Then, one afternoon, a poor traveler named Kato arrived. His clothes were worn, his feet covered in dust, and his possessions nearly empty. Children mocked him as he approached, but he simply smiled and continued forward. When he revealed that he had come to seek Nambi's hand in marriage, laughter filled the compound. "With what?" Ssenkungu asked. "My character," Kato replied. Nanziri mocked him, asking whether character could buy cattle, build a house, or feed children. Kato answered calmly, "It can build everything wealth alone cannot." The villagers laughed, but Nambi felt something different when she saw him. Unlike the wealthy suitors, Kato did not admire her beauty or possessions. He noticed her tired hands, faded clothing, and the pain hidden behind her eyes. He remembered the kindness she had shown when she fed a hungry stranger with her only meal. When Ssenkungu dismissed him for being a poor nobody, Kato accepted calmly. Before leaving, Nambi stopped him and offered him food and water from her own portion. "Our elders teach us never to send a traveler away hungry," she said. Kato smiled and replied, "And mine taught me never to forget the hand that feeds me." Their brief meeting left a quiet connection between them. The villagers laughed at the strange proposal, but old Nalongo Sarah watched silently and whispered, "Never mock the traveler whose footprints are too calm. Sometimes the quietest feet belong to someone walking with destiny." That night, while washing dishes, Nambi found herself thinking about the strange traveler. Unlike the others, he had shown humility instead of pride. The following morning, Ssenkungu announced that Nambi's husband would be chosen in 3 days before village elders. While the village prepared for the gathering, Ssenkungu secretly focused only on removing Nambi from his home so he could complete his plan to steal her inheritance. That night, he revealed his plan to Nanziri. He would encourage the wealthy suitors, but ultimately give Nambi to the poorest man, the traveler, because he believed a poor husband would have no power to challenge his theft of her father's land. Unknown to them, their young son Akina overheard the conversation. The next day, Akina secretly warned Nambi that her uncle planned to marry her off to Kato only because he wanted her gone and powerless. Nambi was afraid, but strangely, the poor traveler was the one man she feared least. Meanwhile, Kato continued his journey, helping strangers and refusing rewards. When his royal guard finally found him, he asked about the kingdom of Bunyoro, but Kato admitted he had not yet found what he was searching for. When asked what made Nambi different from others he had met, he answered, "She gave away her only meal to feed a hungry stranger." The guard understood that the prince had discovered something rare, a kindness that had survived years of suffering. Back in Masaka, preparations for the marriage gathering began. Wealthy suitors arrived with cattle, gifts, and servants, each believing victory was certain. Yet just before sunset, the dusty traveler returned carrying nothing but his walking stick. The villagers laughed again, but old Nalongo Sarah smiled. The leopard does not announce itself with its spots while walking through tall grass. And hidden beneath Ssenkungu's sleeping mat were the forged documents that would soon become the evidence of his downfall. As dawn broke over Masaka, the day chosen for the marriage gathering arrived with an air of celebration. Villagers came from every direction, dressed in their finest gomisis and kanzus. Elders took their places beneath a sprawling fig tree, and the suitors displayed their wealth with obvious pride. Long-horned Ankole cattle stood tethered nearby, gifts of bark cloth, baskets of coffee, goats, and polished ivory ornaments were arranged before the gathering. One by one, each man spoke confidently of the life he could provide. Some boasted of fertile land, others of their cattle, their trading businesses, or the influence of their families. They spoke as though marriage were another possession to be acquired. Throughout it all, Nambi remained silent, her eyes lowered in obedience, while Ssenkungu watched with satisfaction, pretending to weigh each proposal carefully. Then, just as the elders prepared to advise him, a murmur swept through the crowd. The poor traveler had returned. His clothes were as worn as before, his sandals covered in dust, and his only possession remained the walking stick he carried. Laughter rippled across the gathering, but the traveler bowed respectfully to the elders and quietly repeated his request to marry Nambi. The elders looked at one another in confusion. Several gently reminded Ssenkungu that there were far wealthier and more established men seeking his niece's hand. They advised him to consider her future wisely. Ssenkungu pretended to deliberate, rubbing his chin as though wrestling with a difficult decision. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, he declared that he had chosen the poor traveler. Gasps filled the air. The wealthy suitors protested angrily, believing they had been insulted after traveling such great distances. Nanziri hid a satisfied smile, knowing exactly why her husband had made such a choice. To the villagers, it appeared to be a strange decision. Only Ssenkungu and his wife knew it was an act of calculated cruelty. They imagined Nambi condemned to a lifetime of poverty, far from the land that rightfully belonged to her. Nambi herself felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. She did not know the man, nor where he came from, yet she accepted her fate with quiet dignity, believing that perhaps God still had a purpose hidden beyond her understanding. The journey away from Masaka was long and exhausting. For several days they traveled through forests, across rivers, and over rolling hills. The traveler remained kind and attentive, making sure Nambi rested whenever she became tired. He shared every meal equally with her despite possessing very little. Along the road, strangers greeted him with unusual respect that he politely discouraged, and more than once travelers seemed ready to kneel before him before he subtly signaled them not to. Nambi noticed these odd moments, but dismissed them as misunderstandings. As they climbed the final ridge overlooking the kingdom of Bunyoro, she expected to see another humble village. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. Before them rose magnificent palace walls, gleaming beneath the afternoon sun. Royal drums thundered across the valley. Soldiers in ceremonial attire lined the road. Hundreds of attendants bowed deeply as the poor traveler approached. Then, before her astonished eyes, he removed his tattered outer garments, revealing the royal attire hidden beneath. The commander of the royal guard stepped forward, knelt, and proclaimed, "Welcome home, your royal highness, Prince Kato Rugaba." The world seemed to stop. Nambi could scarcely breathe as she realized that the poorest man in Masaka had been the richest in honor all along. The prince gently lifted her trembling hands and assured her that he had concealed his identity to learn the true character of people before accepting the throne. He told her how he had first noticed her generosity when she fed a hungry old man with the only meal she possessed, and how every encounter afterward had confirmed the goodness of her heart. The king and queen welcomed her not as a servant, but as a daughter. They listened quietly as the prince recounted every hardship she had endured. When they learned how she had been treated by her own relatives, tears filled the queen's eyes, while the king's expression hardened with righteous anger. Nambi was given every comfort the palace could offer, yet she remained as humble as the village girl she had always been. She greeted servants by name, shared meals with palace workers, and visited the sick whenever she could. Before long, the people of Bunyoro loved her not because she had become a princess, but because royalty had never changed the kindness already within her. Months later, news reached the palace that Ssenkungu had completed the theft of her parents' estate. He had presented forged documents before local authorities and declared himself the rightful owner of everything his late brother had left behind. Believing Nambi trapped in poverty somewhere beyond the hills, he celebrated openly, expanding the plantations and boasting that fortune had finally rewarded his patience. The prince listened without speaking. Then he ordered preparations for a royal journey to Masaka. On the appointed day, an awe-inspiring procession crossed the countryside. Hundreds of royal guards in shining armor rode ahead, followed by drummers whose rhythms echoed from hill to hill. Chiefs, ministers, judges, and elders traveled behind them. At the center rode Prince Kato and Princess Nambi beneath magnificent royal canopies. Villagers abandoned their gardens and homes simply to witness the spectacle. Word spread ahead of them until all of Masaka gathered in astonishment outside Ssenkungu's compound. When Ssenkungu stepped outside, expecting perhaps a tax inspection or a visit from district officials, he froze. Standing before him was the poor traveler he had mocked, now dressed in royal regalia that shimmered beneath the sun. Beside him stood Nambi, radiant in elegant attire, carrying herself with quiet grace rather than pride. Before the entire village, the royal judges examined every land document. Witnesses who had accepted bribes confessed publicly when confronted with evidence gathered by the prince's investigators. The dishonest clerk admitted altering official records. One by one, every lie unraveled until Ssenkungu's deception stood exposed before the very neighbors he had fooled for years. The king's decree was read aloud. Every acre of land, every coffee plantation, every herd of cattle, and every possession stolen from Nambi's inheritance was restored to her immediately. Ssenkungu and Nanziri lost everything they had unlawfully claimed. Their names became a warning whispered by parents to children about the danger of greed. Many expected Nambi to demand severe punishment, remembering every beating, every insult, every hungry night she had endured. Instead, she stepped forward before the gathered crowd and spoke softly. She said justice had already been done because the truth had prevailed. She asked only that her uncle and aunt be allowed to live in a modest home with enough land to feed themselves, but never again hold authority over what they had tried to steal. Even the king was moved by her mercy. Turning to the villagers, he declared that kingdoms endure not because of armies or wealth, but because people of integrity choose compassion when vengeance would be easier. In the years that followed, the restored lands in Masaka became schools, clinics, and farms that benefited countless families. Nambi often returned to the village, not in anger but in gratitude, remembering the neighbors who had quietly shown her kindness when she had nothing. Children gathered eagerly around her whenever she visited, listening to stories of hope and courage. Old Nalongo Sarah lived long enough to see the prophecy fulfilled. Smiling beneath the same fig tree where the suitors had once gathered, she whispered, "The road may twist through valleys of sorrow, but it always remembers where it is going." And so the orphan girl, whom many believed was destined to die in obscurity, became a queen beloved across kingdoms, while the man who had grasped at wealth with greedy hands discovered that stolen riches vanish like mist before the morning sun. Long after they were gone, storytellers across Uganda would tell of beautiful Nambi of Masaka and the prince who wore poverty like a cloak, reminding every generation that the truest measure of a person is not the clothes they wear, the cattle they own, or the titles they bear, but the goodness they carry in their hearts when no one is watching.